Yeah. So, and then this our mail file. If incoming mail comes in, which I'm pretty sure.
Are you talking to me, Kim?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Life of an Escrow from start to finish.
Kim's making an announcement.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Kim.
Okay. Are you ready?
I can't hear it. Am I supposed to hear anything?
Maybe.
Oh, okay.
You're like, am I supposed to hear stuff?
I don't know.
You're good to go.
Oh, okay.
We're live. We're recording.
Okay, great.
Life of an Escrow.
Life of an Escrow. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I will be going through the process of an escrow transaction from start to finish. All my contact information is on the screen. My email, my phone number. If there's anything you ever need when it comes to an escrow, please feel free to give me a call, send me an email. I'm happy to help you with anything you might need. Let's get this started. What is an escrow? Okay, so for those of you that haven't done a transaction yet, might be new to real estate, we are a neutral party through the entire real estate transaction. We do not side with either party. Everything to the escrow holder has to be mutually agreed upon in writing. We only take written instructions, and it has to be signed, executed by all parties. If there are any changes in terms, changes to the contract, changes to who's buying, selling, anything of this sort. If we're adding fees, charges, again, everything has to be instructed and written and signed. So that's kind of what we are. We handle all the funds that come in from the buyer. We disperse all the funds at closing. We also handle the documents for the transfer of title. We draw everything up, make sure everything gets signed. We handle tax docs for the seller when it comes to selling property. Homeowners insurance for the buyer, you know, for them when they want to make sure it's effective for the date that we close, anything required by their lender if they're getting a loan. That's kind of what the escrow holder does, what we're responsible for in the transaction. Terms to know when you are in escrow, amendments is a big one. There are always amendments typically on any transaction. Anytime you guys do addendums to your purchase agreements, we draw an escrow amendment to our escrow instructions. Our escrow instructions mimic your purchase agreement, so that's kind of how we all get started. And then if there's any changes, terms, price, credits, you know, close of escrow date changes, it could be anything that may be agreed upon changing the contract, we changed our escrow instructions as well. So your docs and my docs reflect the same changes at all times. Appraisal, you know, appraisals aren't always required. Just depends on the lender that's doing the loan. If there is a loan, they'll order the appraisal, schedule the appraisal. You know, a lot of times they ask escrow for a copy of the appraisal report. This is not something that escrow receives. So just so you know, escrow does not receive a copy of the appraisal report. It goes strictly to the buyer. Buyer is the only one allowed to see this report. The lender would have to get approval to send it to any other parties in the transaction. Sometimes if there is like a condition or stipulation that's issued on the appraisal report, we may be able to see it so we can verify what it is the condition is to get cleared, you know, like smoke detectors or stucco or something that may need to be repaired and re-inspected. And something like that, you may be able to receive a copy of the appraisal report. Assumptions, we don't do a lot of assumptions. Lenders are very particular when anyone's trying to assume the loan that they've issued to a different borrower. It does happen though. The buyer for the property, if they're going to assume the seller's loan that's already on the property, there's a process for them to go through to get approved for that loan or what's left of that loan for the new buyer to come in and assume it. Any kind of government issued loan, like FHA, VA, any of that, those loans are not allowed to be assumed by any party. So those are specific government loans that are only approved for that person who received it, no assumptions. Beneficiaries are anyone receiving funds on a deed of trust. It would be the lender or a borrower, you know, who's paying to somebody would be the beneficiary. If you're receiving funds on like a wire transfer, you know, escrow is the beneficiary receiving those funds. Close of escrow is the date that all the documents record, title passes to the new buyer. So this is when everything has been transferred and our transaction has been completely closed, is when that grant deed, deed of trust, any docs that are going to be recorded have been recorded with the county recorder's office. Deed of trust. So deed of trust is the mortgage that gets recorded against the property. The deed of trust is what backs up the note. So the note is the borrower's promise to pay back the loan amount to the lender. The deed of trust backs it up and records the lien against the property. So if that property is ever sold, foreclosed, anything like that, that deed is securing their interest in their loan to make sure that they get paid back. Earnest money deposit, that's usually typically done within 3 business days. Just depends on what's in the purchase agreement. It's good to always make sure you review that when you're reviewing offers to make sure that it's supposed to be within 3 days, or if you're allowing it to be for longer, or if it needs to be in by 1 business day after acceptance, just to make sure to check that out. And then also the type of deposit that comes in, whether it's a personal check, whether it's a electronic transfer, I think is what it says in the contract, or a cashier's check. They're all acceptable to escrow. Most people prefer to do wire transfers since the funds are readily available. There's no stop pays or anything to be concerned about funds getting recalled from the buyer. Easements. So easements are, every property typically has at least 1 or more easements on it. It's so someone has access to the property other than the homeowner. So a lot of easements that are recorded are for utility companies. So like the gas company, the electric company, they typically all have easements recorded against property so they can access it at any time to check meters or, you know, electrical boxes or anything like that. Important easements to always look at would be if there's any surface rights entry. That would mean that you would need approval if you're going to change anything on the surface from the other party that may have surface rights. So one thing to check and look for in your prelim reports if that ever comes up. So good to know, make sure that gets disclosed so everyone's aware. Hazard insurance, which is also known as homeowner's insurance or fire insurance. If you have a loan, if the buyer is obtaining a loan on the property, this is always required. If the property happens to be purchased all cash, hazard insurance is not required. The buyer can waive it. They don't have to get homeowner's insurance if they don't want to, if they're purchasing a property in all cash. Most people want to make sure though that the insurance is effective for the day that we close or day we record. So we typically still pay it through escrow, but it's completely up to the buyer's choice and preference. Lenders require this at closing, has to be effective for the day the lender funds the loan. Also, they require the first year to be paid in full through escrow. So the first year will be paid by us, and on a new purchase, that's standard and what's required by the lender. When it comes to coverage, that just depends on what the lender requires. So we also let the buyer discuss that with their loan officer, their lender, on how much coverage they're going to require based on their loan. Impounds. So impounds kind of go hand in hand with fire insurance, also with property taxes. An impound account, also known as an escrow account, is an account the broker, the buyer's lender, will establish for the borrower. They're collecting taxes and insurance, sometimes mortgage insurance, to make those payments for the borrower on their behalf after close of escrow. Even though it's called an escrow account, it's not anything that's held by escrow. These are all funds held by the lender in a separate account, separate from their loan principal balance that they're collecting payments on. It's something that the borrowers will see on their mortgage statements. If they have an impound account, how much they're collecting every month, when they're dispersing to make payments. If you're doing a refinance or if you're selling a property, I always let clients know to call their lenders as soon as we have closed escrow, because whatever's left in that impound account after the loan has been paid off will get reimbursed to them at close of escrow, and it can take up to 4 weeks or more for these banks to refund clients. So if you have clients that have closed anything, it's always a nice thing to just remind them to call their banks and make sure that they start working on their refund of anything left in the impound account. Legal description. So every property has a legal description. It's in the preliminary title report. It describes the land that's being sold, the parcel that's being sold, and the property. If you have any questions on legal descriptions or boundaries or things like that, maybe reach out to your title companies. They may be able to give you more definitions or details about specifics of the legal. We go off of what the title company has provided us as being the full legal description and gets attached to any recording documents when a property is being sold. So anytime you're recording anything on transfer of title or anything like that, affidavits, quitclaim deeds, deeds of trust, any of those documents all have to have the legal description attached to it. Liens. So liens are any kind of mortgage as well, deeds of trust, debts. It could be judgments. It could be spousal support, child support. I've seen credit card liens. I've seen city tax liens, county tax liens. A lien could be any kind of form of money owed on a property. Mechanics liens. I mean, any kind of judgment. Court has issued a judgment or lien for something that can also be attached to your property. If you have anything like that, you can always pull a title report or view a property profile to see if anything like that's been recorded against your property, just to know and be aware. A lot of times when we get prelim reports, if people have common names in the first prelim report, if they find someone with a common name and they have a child support judgment or a spousal support judgment or something like that, they may put them on our prelim. But that statement of information that our clients complete and sign should clear them of anything that doesn't belong to them. So it's good to get that SI back as soon as possible. So if we need to clear any items like this on title, we can do it right away. Mortgage, again, the instrument that's backing up the note or the repayment of the loan. Again, the deed of trust that gets recorded, the note that the borrower pays, that all gets included with our loan documents signed by the buyer. PITI, I know most of you guys know what that is. So principal, interest, taxes, insurance. So a lot of times there's a lot of rent backs we do, and usually they want to do it at the buyer's, what's going to be the buyer's principal, interest, taxes, insurance. If you're going to do anything like that, just also make sure if homeowners association is involved in the property, if that's supposed to be part of that payment as well. Some people forget to include it. But PITI, yeah, that's what the buyer will pay after they purchase their property. If you're going to do any kind of rent backs based on PITI, that's something that the lender would have to provide. And again, if there's any other miscellaneous fees that need to be included, like HOA dues, just make sure to add that on there if that's something that's going to be part of the transaction. Power of attorneys. So power of attorneys are very specific when it comes to escrow. Title wants to make sure that it specifically states that the power of attorney has authorization to act on real estate transactions. They like it even more when it specifies the property address that they're acting as a power of attorney for whatever reason that the seller cannot sign. Either they're out of town, out of the area, they just don't want to be bothered with it. They'd rather just someone handle the sale of the property for them. If you are using a power of attorney, it's very specific how they sign. If you have questions on how a power of attorney should sign, feel free to call me, email me, but it's very long. Every time they sign, every time they initial, it has to be exactly a specific way as their attorney in fact. So if you have questions about that, just call me, email me. If you need help with power of attorneys, just feel free to reach out to me. Or if you have any questions, Kim, or Deborah, feel free to stop me at any time. Quitclaim deeds or grant deeds, and they're all, you could use a quitclaim deed or a grant deed at any time when you're changing title. Quitclaims are usually used when you're just quitclaiming off one person. You're not necessarily transferring the entire interest of the property into a new owner. We use a grant deed when it's a purchase, sale. Quitclaim deeds if we're removing spouses or brothers, sisters, specifically just maybe one person off the title of the property, not the entire interest that somebody may own. When you're doing deeds, it's very specific on all the verbiage. You want to make sure that everything's listed on the quitclaim deeds. Anyone can draw up a deed. You can Google, California grant deed or California quitclaim deed. Some of our title companies have blank documents on their websites that you can pull. Like I know Orange Coast Title does. I think First American does. Most all of them have access to all these blank recording documents if you want to pull up any of them at any time and fill them out or pass them along to clients. But if you are transferring title without an escrow and you're trying to make sure that you don't get tax reassessed, you want to make sure you talk to hopefully a title rep or escrow to make sure that the R&T codes, the revenue and tax codes, are listed on those documents, which claim that the property is exempt from transfer tax as no proceeds or consideration. The property wasn't actually sold and no one obtained any funds in this transfer of title if you're trying to do any kind of exemption. And then there's also like PCORs, preliminary change of ownership forms that go along with deeds that need to be completed and signed at the time you record. So funding. So funding is the process of what we do with the lender. So there's a funder assigned to the file if the buyer is getting a loan. Once all the documents have been signed, everything's been uploaded to the lender for review. They have approved all the loan docs, all the conditions are met. We request funding from the lender. They don't fund without escrow's request. They actually wire all their funds though to the title company. The title company receives those funds. They make any payoffs to the mortgage for the seller. They pay off taxes. They pay off any liens. Title company handles the payoff of any liens that are recorded on the title report. Anything that's left over the balance as like seller's proceeds, commissions, anything else that escrow would be paying or dispersing gets sent to us after they've made those payoffs for what's on the title report. And recording, so depending on the county, most counties record same day, but like LA County, for example, you cannot fund and record in the same day. So you'll fund one day, record the following day. This is the day everything becomes official, you close, everything is done. But most other counties like Orange, San Diego, Riverside, all those other counties are special same day recording. So if you fund, you can record in the same day. There is a cutoff time, but you can do everything in one day if you're ready to go. Okay, life of an escrow. Here is my flow chart. So when you begin, buyer and seller sign their purchase agreement. The listing agent or the buyer's agent will open escrow. Buyer will submit their deposit within the 3-day waiting period or 3-day after acceptance. Typically 3 days after accepting, however the contract reads. We open title. I know a lot of realtors, as soon as they take their listings and they're officially on the market, they may pull a title report, which is totally fine. Then we're ready to go once we open escrow. Once we get that order, we get the report in, we'll prepare escrow instructions, all of our escrow documents for the buyer, for the seller. Each party gets their own documents to sign, return. Once they sign everything, send it all back, we process it all. Basically drawing up vesting for the buyer, ordering payoffs for the seller, prepping any other documents once we receive that package back. It's good to always, make sure that these clients send back their documents as soon as possible so we can process it as quickly as possible. That way we're ready to go. There's nothing holding up the escrow. We review the preliminary title report as well. If there's anything on the title report that stands out to us, we'll bring that to your attention. Make sure that we get payoffs information from the seller if there's something that needs to be removed or paid, so that the buyer receives free and clear title other than the new loan that they're obtaining. The statement of identity, the SI form I had mentioned earlier, we make sure to get that to title as well as quickly as we can so they can clear it, abstract it to make sure that the seller doesn't have any liens, judgments, anything like that in their name that may not be recorded to the property, but if it pulls and it's in their name and their social, we do have to pay that through escrow. So if they have a child support judgment or some kind of lien out there, it may not be recorded to the property, but if they find it when they run the SI, it does have to be paid. So the sooner we get that cleared, the better, because if there is something that has to be paid, a demand has to get ordered, and you just don't know how long that might take. So it's good to kind of get it all back and process as soon as possible. Like I said, we order payoffs. We update you with any lender status. Make sure that we request lender, to give us status on docs if they need anything else from escrow. There's a lot of back and forth with us and the lender when we're in a transaction. And there's a lot of documents they need us to order, to prep, to send over. Estimates, we go back and forth on fees. Loan amount may fluctuate depending on what the fees are. So that's something that we go back and forth with. Helping the lender to clear all their conditions for loan documents. Again, we review all the payoff demands that come in, review all the documents. Lots of fun processing, life of paper. So once all the conditions have been met with the lender, we are getting ready to prep for loan documents. We make sure we get all of our invoices in. So if there's home warranty, if there's termite, make sure anything that needs to be submitted into escrow, we'll follow up with. Make sure we get the buyer's new insurance. If we have HOA, we want to make sure the demand's in, any liens are prepped, any demands are prepped, all the fees and everything gets inputted. If there are any requests for repairs and you guys are doing credits through escrow, make sure that you give us those requests for repairs or addendums, however much the credit is that if you need it to be done through escrow, make sure you let escrow know. It's happened more times than I can say that we get missed when it comes to a credit for a request for repairs, or someone forgot to mention, oh, the ceiling fan, it's not working. We're supposed to do $100 credit and nobody told escrow. So if there's any bills or anything that needs to be paid through escrow when it comes to the financials, make sure you tell your escrow officer, make sure that they're aware so they can note the file and draw an amendment and make sure that they get an invoice or the amount of whatever needs to be paid. When it comes to HOAs, I've had files before where all of a sudden HOA comes up at the last minute. They didn't tell us, they didn't know, they kept saying there's no HOA, and all of a sudden there is an HOA. So good thing to ask your sellers too when you're on your listing appointments, if there's an HOA or homeowners association, that we get all that information so we know how to order them. 99% of these HOAs require you to pay their document fees or their resale demand fees up front. So we'll need a credit card or a check or a money order from the seller to make those payments. And it could take 8 to 10 business days to get HOA docs ordered and in. So if there is an HOA, make sure that we get the information. We can look up, what the process is, the turnaround time. Make sure you know what the dues are so we can do the estimate. Yeah, and if you're not sure if the property has an HOA or not, just double check with the sellers. They should hopefully be making dues, payments, or anything to the HOA if there's anything that's monthly or annually. Okay, once we receive the loan documents, we let everybody know loan docs are in. We review all the docs to make sure that the vesting's right, that we balance to the lender's closing disclosure. At this time, we'll prep all of our final docs for everybody to sign on both sides. Do a full audit of the file. Anything else the buyer may need to sign, we add with loan documents. Sometimes there may be seller documents to sign in those docs. It's not rare, but there's usually a page or two that the seller may need to sign that they've also received their closing disclosure as part of TRID. So all the seller's docs, estimates, all final documents will go to the seller, usually via DocuSign at this time. And to the buyer, we set up a notary. They can sign with us. I'm a notary, Maricella's a notary. I know Debbie at Calabasas is a notary, and Ashley as well. So we usually make up the appointments with the clients. They can sign with us, they can sign mobile, whatever accommodates them. Once everything's out for signature, docs come back. We make sure that we follow up with the buyer on their funds to close, final funds, make sure they get wired. When it comes to the buyer and EMD and funds to close, anytime the buyer is submitting funds to escrow, it should be done direct between escrow and the buyer. It's not to be anything with any kind of third parties or send to the agent, then send to the buyer. When it comes to funds, wires, things like that, it should go from buyer to escrow officer, buyer, direct. I always recommend to tell your buyers to make sure that they speak to your escrow officer. It's all over my email, my wire instructions, to make sure those buyers call us to verify information prior to sending any funds, to make sure nothing's, changed, everything's the same, that everything's been verified before they send any funds to escrow. There's just too much email fraud, wire hacking out there, things like that, of that nature, email hacking. It's just safer, more secure if it's done between escrow and the client. So just remind your agent or your clients to always call escrow when it comes to funds. And once I get all the docs back, of course, we review everything. We package those loan docs. They need to go back to the lender for review. Some lenders will table fund on copies. Some require originals, just depends on the bank. At the same time, we'll send all the recording docs down to title so they can review them as well. We'll process any funding conditions that come in after the lender's reviewed everything. Once we're ready, we'll request funding from the lender. If they're ready, then they'll let us know that the file's officially been funded. They wire funds to the title company. Title will review our docs. We, as escrow, call title to release the file for recording. Like I said, there is a cutoff time. Most of the counties, their cutoff time is 3 o'clock. Some may be able to push it by 3:30. So if you don't have your file funded and ready to go by 3:30, you won't be able to record the next day. You definitely have to have it released in order to record the next day. Same thing for Orange County. If you're going to record same day, or Riverside, everything needs to be in by 3 o'clock in order to record special or the next day. Once we officially record, close, everything's congratulations, awesome. Buyer gets their keys from their realtor. Usually I let everybody know within 24 hours of closing, we'll disperse all funds, because it kind of just depends on recording and closing. You can record and close anytime between when you release it, if it's a special, and the end of the day, which is like 5:30. If it's LA County, I mean, it could be 8 a.m. or it could be 5 p.m. the next day. So it's just hard to say when we're going to get the confirmation. And we're still also, remember, waiting for the wire from the title company of the funds that's left over from what they received from the lender. So funds go to title, they close, and then they still have to wire us funds usually. Unless it's like all cash, then we have all the funds, and vice versa, we send funds to them. But yeah, so usually disbursement within 24 hours of closing. We'd like to get it out same day or as soon as possible, but just depends on when we get that confirmation, when we get the final fees from title, and when we get their wire. So, and then all docs go out. Everyone gets their final closing statements. Recorded docs, anything that gets recorded, if the buyer, they're going to get the original grant deed in the mail, it can take up to 4 weeks. There's docs that come back from the county assessor's office a lot of the time after closing. I would just let your client know, if they get documents after close of escrow and they have questions, they can always ask the escrow officer. They can always call the county as well to ask them what they've sent. Sometimes they get a lot of spam stuff, so it's good to just double check what they're receiving. Yeah. Life of an escrow from start to finish. If there are any questions or any concerns, thanks, Robin. If there's anything you want to ask, now is the time. I mean, you can email me, call me. If not, Kim, anyone else there? Hello? No? Okay, well, thank you for joining me today. If there's anything else you guys need, seller net.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. Can you go over the 3-day rule for the CD and why that exists?
Oh, I think TRID, I'm trying to remember what year TRID came into effect. It's been
2017 or 2014 or 15 maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was probably around then. TRID is basically supposed to be a better way to disclose fees to the buyer. And instead of doing what we used to have were HUDs, those big legal size HUD spreadsheets, they went away with those. There's no longer any HUDs. They don't exist. And now we have a closing disclosure. And in order for the buyer to have time now to review those fees that they're now supposedly have a better disclosure on, which is the closing disclosure, they've given them a 3-day right to cancel. So anytime the CD has been issued, they have 3 days to review those fees and cancel the loan if they so choose. So they don't, it's kind of like that cooling off period. Because as before, there was no time frame. The buyer didn't have any of that. Sometimes the disclosure was hard for them to understand on a HUD. But this was supposed to be an easier process for buyers to review fees, to have time to review fees, so they fully understand their loan that they're getting. Does that answer that question? And just so you know, that 3-day rule, Saturday counts, Sunday does not count, or any other like bank federal holiday does not count, I believe, for that 3-day waiting period.
Sarah, I have somebody asking for contact info. So can you give me your email address and I'll type it in here on Facebook?
Yeah, it's also on the first page. I can
Oh,
go
perfect.
phone number, email on the bottom, but
There you go. Joan Fields Evans, can you see that on the screen? And Melanie said thank you.
oh, welcome, Melanie. Thanks for coming.
I'm just waiting, to make sure Joan sees that screen. It is up now. Anybody else have any other questions they'd like to ask Sarah? We had a real nice turnout. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thank you, everybody. Again, if you need seller net sheets or have questions on net sheets, happy to prep those for you. Just email me with all the information, property address, purchase price, commissions. If we need to add any other fees, so like warranty, termite, things like that.
And
Seller-
Joan did acknowledge she sees the screen, so she has your info.
Great.
Laura Leslie says thank you as well. So, all
Well, hi, Laura Leslie.
right, I think looks like there aren't any more questions. We're good. Thank you so much, Sarah. We do appreciate it. We appreciate everybody's patience and hanging in there with our technical difficulties, but she did a great presentation, a lot of good information.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Hope to see you all soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Robin.